listening to Regeneration Rising, a podcast from Quivira Coalition's new Agrarian Program that provides information and inspiration to agrarians beginning their journey in regenerative agriculture. Each episode will explore what it means to work in regenerative agriculture, how people come to choose this as their livelihood, and why it's important to them and our future. We hope this podcast provides a foundation of knowledge for future agrarians and land stewards so they can rise up and focus on a regenerative approach to community, relationships, and the land. Hello, and welcome back to the Regeneration Rising podcast. I'm Christina Britt, and today my guest is Jesse Pinkner. Jesse and his wife, Leah, are running a ranch on leased family land in the panhandle of Texas. I'm excited to have Jesse on today as he has participated in many of Quivira's programs, including 2 years as a new Agrarian Program apprentice, and most recently in our Manager Fellowship. Before we jump in, I'd like to remind everyone about our upcoming Regenerate Conference in Santa Fe, New Mexico, from November 5th through 7th. We'd love to have you, so check out our speaker and workshop lineup and register online at regenerateconference.com. We're also looking for a few folks to volunteer for our virtual conference, so if you're not able to be there in person but still want to plug in, reach out to me at christina@quiviracoalition.org. Hey, Jesse. Thanks for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
So let's dive in. Tell us about your upbringing in agriculture. I know that you had some family land, but yeah, tell us about it.
Yeah, it's a little unconventional. I guess you would say that I definitely did not grow up in ag, although our family land I grew up coming to when I was a kid, once or twice a year. So my upbringing, I guess, my family has land here in the panhandle of Texas, about 1,200 acres, and it's been in the family since 1917. And technically, I would be right now the fifth generation, but the actual ranching around here sort of skipped a generation. It would be like my parents' generation. So I came more, visiting my grandparents and their sort of hobby herd of cattle when I was a kid, and we'd be branding cattle and stuff like that. But it would always be for like a short week at a time or so. And that was pretty much it until I met my significant other, Leah, when we were in high school, and we went to college together, but we sort of grew with each other. I would bring her down here, and we sort of fell in love with the place together with different eyes. And we had always had that question of how do we get down there and live down there in general, but with no, experience in ag or how to do any of that at all. So that was sort of like the ultimate goal in our relationship. And then, everything sort of changed when we kind of stumbled into the Quivira program.
Awesome. Yeah, now my next question was, how did you find Quivira? But it sounds like it was kind of a just happenstance.
Yeah. So Leah and I both had jobs in St. Louis after graduating college. We went back to St. Louis where we were born and raised. And, we're just doing the daily grind was kind of the mission. Like I said, we would still come and visit the ranch down here in Texas and dream about how do we do that. But Leah was working in a plant biology lab. I was working at a nonprofit there, and her job was as an extension from, the St. Louis University ag sector. And she found out through her boss about the Quivira Coalition. And it's funny because we before applications for the new Agrarian Program opened, we spent all of our time listening to Regeneration Rising and as much of the podcast
Cool.
as we could, and that's was sort of our beginning into the regenerative world, specifically a way that we could actually learn the skills, right? Because like I said, we had always thought about how do we live on the ranch down there without knowing anything about ag, and obviously ag would be the most obvious answer of how to make a living or try to make it work, but didn't know anything about it. So Quivira was a really cool, obvious answer. So we applied, and we're excited about it, but hesitant because like I said, we didn't know anything. So who would pick us, right, to work on their ranch? So we applied and then sort of wrote it off for, I don't even remember how long the application process was. It felt like more than half a year. But then we were like out camping one day and we had just a little bit of cell service and got a call from a guy in Montana that wanted to have us out at his place. And
Wow.
from our conversations with people in the program too, it was relatively rare that places would take like a couple, let alone most
Mm.
places don't even take two apprentices at a time. So it was pretty special that we were able to learn those skills together at the same time, because that was our goal in moving to Texas as well, that we'd be running the place together. So yeah, we got the call and interviewed a couple times, and then within maybe like 4 months, we were packing up our entire lives and getting ready to move to a 300 square foot tiny house in the middle of central Montana, which was a pretty liberating experience in and of itself, just getting rid of all of the crap we didn't need and
Yeah.
size downsizing. And yeah, then we spent 2 seasons there as apprentices, and Leah went on that third year to work for the conservation district for the county as a district administrator, and then for really good friends that we made in the area, run a vegetable farm operation, sort of co-op that Leah worked at as well. And then throughout that third year, I was still as a ranch hand there on the ranch, and that whole third year was building into, how do we actually make the move and make it to Texas, which was a crazy challenge. I don't think we were really expecting to come up against. Our family land nowadays is run by a family council. So the land was purchased in 1917. The original purchasers would be my great 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 grandparents. They had 4 sons, and then those are like the main branches of the family. So every branch now has 2 representatives, and there's like a speaker for the family council as well. So as we go through like, new changes to the property or making decisions or stuff like that, everybody sort of, those representatives come to the table and then, go back to their branches to talk on the broader family scale and then bring the decisions back to the table. So the property had been leased after my grandparents left and passed away and everything. The property was leased to a local neighbor for, shoot, like 20 years, since I was, maybe 8, 10 years old or something like that. So we were asking the family council, even though we were family, we were asking them to break a lease with, a
Mm.
lessee that had been 20 years and like really reliable, and obviously knew about ranching in the area. And like, we were the kids in the family that I was the kid in the family that everybody watched grow up, from a baby, and like knew my background and everything. So there was no way to sort of like fake it to that group of people. Right. So
Yeah.
like being brutally honest to everybody about our experience level, but what we wanted to do and what we were learning was so different than the way the place has been run ever. So luckily for us, the majority of people were really excited about it. And, it's challenging with individual family members here and there. I ended up doing a lot more politicking than I thought I would be doing, calling individuals like night after night while living in Montana and trying to make time for ranch work as well, working 10, 12-hour days, 6, 7 days a week sometimes, and coming up with a grazing plan before we even moved here, and not even knowing what our business strategy would look like, but just getting like really excited about it. And then we like built out this whole presentation, even like PowerPoint presentation, that we talked to the family council over Zoom about. Like we had to teach them like, this is what regenerative ranching is and everything. So like I said, it was a crazy process, but they gave us the lease, and since we're family, they were willing to give us a break on the lease, a little cheaper rate for the first 2 years that we negotiated to help us get started. And it's been really cool in terms of like working with the family so far. Every 2 years we have a family reunion. So we just had a family reunion this last June that everybody was here. And it was the first one we since we moved here. Actually, we were able to have that family reunion and actually walk people around and show them, electric fencing and cow herds and mobile water and fencing off the riparian zones and all the new growth that we've seen in different places, and really show them like what we're looking at in terms of ground cover and all the aspects of the regenerative side of grazing cattle. And it was amazing. Everybody was so stoked, and like, how can we help? What can we do to make it better? So it's been really cool, because I feel like that's certainly one of the pros of working with family, is like, if you can hack it into something like that, like nobody's going to support you more than the family that's watched you grow up from a little kid. So I wrote a piece about what we're talking about now in the Quivira magazine, and every year we have like a quirky talent show at the family reunion. And so for my talent, I read that piece out loud for everybody, and all of the old heads were just like crying in the back row, trying to keep it together. And so it's been really cool bringing like new life and family back onto the ranch. And, we're really excited about that aspect of it. So, yeah.
Yeah, that's a non-classic setup there. That sounds I'm sure can also be a little messy sometimes, but it sounds like the support is definitely worth the mess. Tell us a little bit about your current operation and what y'all are up to.
Yeah, so we hit the ground running when we moved here, custom grazing. We met some folks pretty close by us who were doing some similar stuff. And then 6 months after we moved here, these crazy record fires came through the area and burned over 1 million acres and really dropped the cow herd and everything. Those fires came within 8 miles of our property. So the custom grazing scene, was in dire need for people to send cattle places. So we were able to establish really local relationships in doing all of that, which is something I think is unique. Not in the custom grazing world. It seems to me like a lot of times you're sort of throwing out your property or your stats of what you're charging, and then throw it out on Facebook or Ranch World Ads or something like that, and you'll end up with people from all over the place who call you and are interested. But the value of having done what we're doing with local folks is invaluable. It's really, really cool. And, they're only 20 minutes away. So having help back and forth with brandings and stuff, it's basically like working with a neighbor. And we're talking about moving into even ownership dynamics with them since they are so close and monitoring their cow herd too. They want to do something with us and expand their herd into a different class or a different season, and are excited about what we're doing here. So I don't know. It's a cool atmosphere of just when you do stuff with local neighbors and stuff, of people who just want you to succeed again. That aspect sort of came up in our life. So it's been really cool. Yeah, but challenging in the fact that like our place here is the infrastructure is 70 years old, and the
Mm.
last maintenance done on it was, maybe 10 years ago. So when we moved here, we're like, we want to run cows here, but like we don't have corrals or like a loadout chute or any of this stuff. So like really trying to prioritize what the necessity would be for that business model and just trying to hack it, making it work. And it's funny, like neighbors will drive by and see me putting up electric fence or like hauling a hay bale with a four-wheeler or carrying sacks of hay or mobile water or whatever. And it's just like the craziest side eye, but like, it works, and it makes sense for what we want to do and how we want to do it. So we're constantly improving and open to change and stuff. But yeah, it's been pretty cool. So
Yeah, I feel like every farm I go to, I'm like always surprised at how innovative people get with things, especially farmers. I feel like they can like figure out anything and like all those pieces that they used 10 years ago and they're like scraps somehow fit into the farm still.
that's what I love about it so much, is that on a daily basis, you're a plumber, an electrician, and working in animal husbandry, or like a scientist, a biologist. Like all of this stuff pops up for 10, 15 minutes a day in your life, but it's so diverse, and yeah, it like constantly keeps you on your toes. So yeah, I don't know. I enjoy the looks from neighbors. It's a good topic of conversation. You can remain open enough to just go up and say, hey, not not keep to yourself all the time there. People like to talk about it, whether or not it's what they would do.
Yeah, so what are y'all's goals for the ranch in the next few years?
Yeah, complicated. we we were really excited about like pie in the sky, owning our own herd and doing the genetic stuff. We were really, talked about honing in on and stuff like that. But obviously what everybody's been seeing in the cattle market is pretty crazy. So we've been doing like a little bit of buy sell stuff, and then like I said, custom grazing. But I think the long term goal is to get to a position where we can purchase cattle and do our own herd in the shorter term. The next 2 to 5 years, we're definitely custom grazers. It works for us, and it makes a lot of sense where we're at right now. But we'll see. we're open to a lot of different stuff in Montana, sort of to help fund, our transition into ag here in Texas. Leah and I ran meat, chickens, and pigs, and we're sort of building a direct market with those other friends that I had mentioned Leah was working with for the vegetable side of things to direct market those meat products. And we were building like a really healthy clientele there. And we're kind of sad to leave that behind because it was, on the edge of really blowing up too. So I don't I don't think that's like a big part of our goals, at least here, but I don't know. I think what I would say is really like exciting about mine and Leah's relationship is that we just try whatever and see what works, and then kind of run with it. So yeah, so those are some of our goals. Like I said, mostly getting into more ownership, and there's a lot of lease opportunities I think here around us as well. People sort of aging out and looking for good land stewards, and it's just all about relationship maintenance and community building. Actually, my great grandparents helped start Wolf Creek Neighbors. We live on Wolf Creek, and all of the neighbors who owned a piece of property attached to Wolf Creek would meet up, once a month and have like a potluck dinner and stuff. That was my great great grandfather's relationship, and when we would come to visit my grandparents, we would go to those meetings, and now we're here and taking our daughter to those meetings. So it's us, me and Leah and my brother and his wife and our 1 year old. And then like the next youngest person is probably, oh man, 70, mid 70s, something like that. So it's a interesting and fun atmosphere.
Tell us, like, what are the pros and cons of such a, like, family-centric setup, and what are some great things? I know we talked a little bit about that, but yeah, if you could expand upon that a little bit.
Yeah, I mean, one of the greatest things in my mind is that, an agreement has been made that it will always be an undivided interest. So the LZ Ranch originally was close to 9 sections, and now we're quite a bit smaller. But what we have is here to stay, and I think everybody's got this mindset of preserving it for the next generation, and it's really exciting to be more of the boots on the ground, like actually preserving the grassland itself. But having a family dynamic like that, it's a little bit of a system of checks and balances that when people bring up certain topics, it's like that's the reminder that we're all here to sustain this place, right? So that's really encouraging because I totally have that mindset as well. That's what we're doing. We want to be here. We want it to be here for our children and their children and so on. I think as a con wise, you could probably tell without me even having to say it. Having that many hands in the decision making process is inherently difficult. When you propose a question to a group of people, everybody feels obligated to give an opinion, even if it's not, even if it's not super necessary for everyone to have an opinion, even if everybody has the same opinion, they still have to give an opinion. It can be exhausting, but man, it's so cool to have those family reunions and have everybody here singing the same songs that my great grandparents' generation wrote while on horseback, rounding up cattle. And it's it's almost hard to talk about without getting emotional. That just that feeling of adventure and romance and home, that comes along with all that stuff. And that's why we're doing it. It's pretty special, and we're very lucky to be in the situation that we're in. There's a lot of peers that have gone through the new agrarian program that don't have access to a situation like this, and it's really unique and it's awesome. So
Yeah, that's
yeah.
beautiful. I love that. Yeah, let's switch gears just a little bit. So you were a part of our manager fellowship this year. Can you tell us a little bit about the different aspects of the fellowship for those who don't know much about it?
The manager fellowship, when I was originally talking with some of the coordinators about what this could be, my sentiment was sort of having been through like the ranching for profit space. We went into that sort of situation and we're surrounded by people who were trying to fix a lot of their problems with their operations and so on. And we're in this position of not really having any problems to fix. So we're sort of our own group of 2 to 4 people at those meetings that would, not really have anything to contribute in that space. And I feel like that's a really cool part of coming out of the NAP program. We're ready to hit the ground running and have a unique set of problems. So it really has been for me like a cool place, almost a sounding board of peers who are, like I said, struggling with similar problems and having similar successes, and simple things like just trying to figure out what our custom grazing rate should be, and like talking to other folks who are doing that. It's been neat to have that peer-to-peer contact, and then at the same time, we're getting access to other experts in the field that can help us with our goals. And I think the coordinators in the fellowship program have done a really good job of listening to of asking and listening to the things that we feel like we need. And then just, I mean, that's the cool thing about Quivira is like you can just go down the list of all of the resources of people at their disposal that they can call on, and are super excited to help new agrarians in this generation of people try to make it work. We've had we've had a lot of really great access to people who are, I would say, experts in their field that we've been able to use as part of that sounding board as well.
What were some of the most useful resources, experiences, or takeaways that you learned in the program? And what are you going to bring back to the ranch after the fellowship program?
I guess first of all, the place that we got to go to start to kick off the whole program at Piscines Ranch in California was pretty amazing. Getting to meet everybody in that atmosphere, like walking around, a pretty interesting regenerative place, and then talking about business in the regenerative space is all pretty cool. At that initial kickoff, we were working with Dave Pratt, which I'd said before, from a ranching for profit perspective, being involved in that program, there's a lot of older or more experienced ranchers in that program who are sort of working on correcting generational issues and maybe financial mishaps that they may have had, whereas we're coming into that space like not having made any of those mistakes yet. So as the founder of Ranching for Profit, it was really interesting working with Dave Pratt because it seemed like kind of a switch for him as well, in the sense that he was almost starting off with like the whole Ranching for Profit spiel, but like it wasn't really clicking with everybody to begin with. But then after having dinner and lunch with him and talking offhand and then back to class more or less, it really shifted to like, what would you do, if you were starting from zero in our perspective. And we were able to take a much more in-depth look at like individualized, this is where each of us are at, and like how would we go about starting from where we're at and like moving forward, and then like creating those goals. And then the cool part about the fellowship program is after that, like creating those goals, you get into teams, and then you like check in with each other, and you can bounce those ideas off of people. For example, like these are the goals that I've had and these are the challenges I'm facing, and you can use that your own group sort of as a sounding board. So all that to say that that was like a really cool way to start off the program itself. And then further on into the year of being in the fellowship program, I think for our operation in particular, we got to meet a lot with Caroline Wild, which was really helpful for us to dive more deeply into the financial side of things, and even take a step back from the ranching for profit aspect and look at our animal units and what it costs us to run an animal unit, to produce those individual units, and then how that was like a really fine-tuned way of like discovering where the ranching for profit term is where the dead wood is, right? And like how to hone in and utilize our resources the best that we can. So we used a bunch of her time actually and sort of formulated a plan, and that resource in particular we're using to extrapolate into applying for grants and stuff, and showing these people that are potentially giving out grants like what our business actually looks like under the hood. And I feel like that's sort of an invaluable resource that a lot of us coming from the NAP program sort of get stuck into, is like, especially when you talk about grant writing and securing capital from outside resources, is how do you show exactly what you can do financially, especially when you've had no years of production, then to get involved in even small production, but just to have really solid system of like looking at your numbers it shows that you at least know what you're doing, and it's totally scalable, that you could add bigger numbers into this Excel spreadsheet and it would still work this way. The only missing piece is that influx of capital. So yeah, those things in particular come right off the top of my head as being super valuable.
Yeah, definitely. I can see how once you start getting into farming, there's all these different pieces and all these different hats you have to wear. And for me personally, financial like guru is not one of those hats. So I can imagine that would be super helpful. Yeah. So why, I think you've spoken a little bit about it, but why was the fellowship important to you at this particular time in this moment?
That financial piece is a big part of it. Like, it's been a really cool resource for us to get assistance on whatever we need. If there's somebody we need to talk to about a certain aspect, the coordinators in the program have been really cool about us bringing that to the table, and they sort of like hunt through the Quivira ether for people for us to consult with. But more than that, like, it was really like sad, I think, for Leah and myself to be leaving the NAP program. We had like a really solid foundation of people that we continue to talk to outside of the fellowship program now. Like, we consider really good friends that we met through NAP, but that organic sort of sounding board that just came up with every other apprentice in that program of like, these are our hopes and dreams, and like the way we see making it work, and then like calling each other on maybe there's a different way to look at it, or have you talked to this person, or so on. And I think that's, I don't know that I could assign a value to that in our life right now. Still being connected to that kind of energy and group of people is like, makes it still like really exciting, what we want to do, rather than just being held up on our own ranch. Like, this is what we learned 2 years ago and we're going to keep doing it until who knows when. So yeah, I think that connection with those people in particular is pretty awesome.
People talk about ranching being super isolating. So yeah, it's cool to see that you found community in this group too. Now that you've gone through the fellowship, who would you suggest apply to the program? What advice would you have for anybody that's interested?
It's one of those situations where you definitely get out what you put in. And I think that sort of leads into like who I would recommend the program for. Like, I'm not even sure I'm done with the program yet. I feel like it has so much potential to be like an ongoing thing, if nothing else, just for that connection, like I've been saying. But with regenerative and adaptive management, it's exactly that in every sector of the business, not just, the ecological management that we're doing, but adapting to all the wildness in the markets right now and changing weather and all that kind of stuff. So I would say that it's open to anybody. We even had people in the program who are thinking about starting a business who are not even like fully there yet. I think, I would recommend it to anybody who's interested in furthering an agricultural career around a group of people like I've been describing. Um, but totally, like, you get out what you put in, and the more motivated you are to show up for the meetings and to ask, the coordinators for exactly what you need, and kind of hold them to that, that's what they're going to work to give you out of the program. So you get what you put in for sure.
Well, thank you so much for talking about your experience. We're going to rotate into our rapid fire questions section. First thing that comes into your brain, what is one book that everyone should have on their shelf?
Oh man, I guess it's kind of split for me. Let's see. There's, I guess, one book that like really changed my outlook when we were like driving back and forth to Montana a bunch of times, because we were born and raised in St. Louis. That's where our family was. So 24-hour drive one way, listening to audiobooks and stuff.
Jeez.
We listened to Michael Pollan's An Omnivore's Dilemma, and that like
Oh,
really
yeah,
shifted our point of view in the food world of like what we were doing. So that was like a really formative book, I think is super cool. But after owning cattle and like getting into like the livestock business itself and animal husbandry, I've found that rereading Fred Provenza's Nourishment has been really interesting to give you like a whole different look on nutritional wisdom. And having a 1-year old, that's kind of a fascinating book to read through a different lens.
for sure.
Yeah.
I have not read that, so I'll have to put that on my list. Yeah, what's your favorite flavor of ice cream?
Chocolate all the way.
If you could travel anywhere in the world right now, where would you go?
I think Leah and I both are like really interested in food systems. and like the end goal of agriculture, and then like actually to the point of like cooking and like creating really really like high quality and like tasty meals, so I think someplace like where you could tour the agriculture all the way to that end product, like I'm saying, would be really cool. Like maybe like Copenhagen, or I don't know, some place like that, like France or Italy or something maybe.
All right, and the last one, a nugget of advice for other beginning agrarians is.
Oh man, I guess I'd say keep your head down. There's so many opportunities that come up when you're just like not even expecting it, and to have a plan would be another really good one. Set up. I used to think that like 5-year plans were just so lame, in like high school and college. Like, what do I need that for? It's it's really amazing to have set at this point like a 2-year plan, and to like be beating that plan, and like now we know that we need to start planning for 5 or 10 years out, because it's possible if you write it down and start like taking the steps to get that first goal. It's a compounding effect. So yeah, keep your head down and stick to your plan.
Awesome. Sounds good. Thanks, Jesse, for joining us today.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Thank you so much for tuning in. Applications for our year-long manager fellowship are now open through September 20th. Learn more about the fellowship and apply online using the link in the show notes. If you'd like to connect to the broader Quivira community of ranchers, farmers, conservation and government agency professionals, educators, nature nerds, curious consumers, and more, we are excited to have you. Our website is quiviracoalition.org, and in the upper right, click on Newsletter to sign up for our newsletter, where we share happenings and events, learning opportunities, job postings, and more. Also, if you're enjoying this podcast, please leave us a review and rating. It really will help other people find us and maybe even find their next step in regenerative agriculture. Thanks so much, and see you next time. This podcast was produced by Quivira Coalition in our quest to support resilience on working lands. Learn more about our work and how you can support regenerative agriculture and solutions to climate change at quiviracoalition.org. This episode was edited and engineered by Caleb Wenzel-Fisher. A folk story, our theme music, was made by Cristoforetti, and we're grateful for our guests who take time out of their busy lives to share their experiences with us.